Welcome to the Monday, January 31st Talk About Our Democracy Zoom meeting. Gene Boardman and Woody Bernhard discuss Woody's idea that the true meaning of democracy, translated from the Greek, is people rule. Woody is director of We Celebrate Democracy, Civil Rights for All, a nonprofit dedicated to positive, nonviolent public action for democracy and civil rights for all people. Woody lives in Marlboro. Gene is the owner of the Whetstone Inn in Marlboro, Vermont.
Welcome, everyone, to this Talk About Our Democracy Zoom meeting from Marlboro, Vermont on Monday, the 31st of January, 2022. This meeting is being recorded, so watch what you say. And it will be broadcast on BCTV and WVEW. The program for tonight is I'll make a short presentation that I call Redefining Democracy, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So to start with, democracy from the Greek doesn't mean people vote. It means literally people rule. So is there a difference between the two concepts? Can we redefine democracy based on people rule? So is there a difference between the two concepts, people vote and people rule? Can we redefine democracy based on people rule? And would it help us if we looked at it that way? So that's what this presentation is about. If we forget about our current political system, counting votes, political parties, political campaigns, different nationalities, ethnicities, cultures, and religions, and ways of life, if we just stick with the idea that people rule, then would we be able to figure out what democracy is and make it work better? The way we run our democracies right now is producing terrible results. Look at the state of the world today, the physical world, the cultural and political world. The harm that is being done is just so terribly sad. The wars, the refugees, the starvation, the assassinations, the jailing and murder of journalists and teachers and professors and other people who claim they have rights, the poisoning of the land we live on, global warming, the ultimate. And then there is the media itself, which is biased by the profit motive and which encourages us to think that buying stuff will make us happy and may even save the world, when in fact the opposite is true. At our last Talk About Our Democracy meeting, Dan DeWalt said he thinks that the representational republic that we have now could work if it had rules in place to keep out greed and the influence of the wealthy. Well, I'm hoping that we can come up with something. So what Dan said, is that the issue? Is the corrupting power of money the issue? Will that power be there no matter what? Is that the real problem? Are we simply up against human nature? And is human nature, excuse me, the supremacist way, the Machiavellian way? Machiavelli has often been called the father of modern political philosophy and political science, because his message that dishonest, hurtful, manipulative, murderous behavior is okay, works. That message works for our leaders and the rich and powerful among us. It gives them permission to be terrible human beings in order to get what they want. If it's human nature that's our problem, then what? Do we need spiritual leadership, moral guidance, inspiring stories, a new culture of helping? Maybe changing the human genome to get rid of our supremacist nature. We could also try rebranding critical race theory and call it reality-based education, which is what it is. That would help, but it's not going to be enough to get us out of this. Should God come down and straighten us out? If only it could be that simple. Well, I keep coming back to the idea that people rule. What does people rule mean? Maybe if we thought about what a real democracy looks like, maybe that would help us figure it out. What do you think it would look like? Well, we've all probably thought a lot about it, and we all probably have similar ideas. Well, for one thing, people would be happy. Not party time happy, but time to think happy, content and satisfied. We would be happy because we could relax, knowing that we could count on our government to take care of us and to help us take care of each other and work together to right the wrongs of the world. So we would be thinking about how we could help each other. We would be thinking about how we, for example, in conversation, in our work, instead of competing to show how much smarter, better, cleverer, or more entertaining than other people we are, as we often do now with our friends, we could be thinking about and learning how to help each other and about ways to handle real problems. I guess the first thing to do to get ready to face these tough times would be to admit that we have problems, because we can't fix any problems that we won't admit to. We like to think that we are right, that we can do no wrong, that we are not to blame, or we might be too shy to talk. But global warming and what it says about us as a society is hard to deny. We do have to change. I have to change. For me, a big part of that is to share what I think with you. My shyness makes it hard for me to do that, but I feel like I have to do it. So we would admit to ourselves that competition and making ourselves look good or being too shy to speak up is a dead end, even though that may be the way we were brought up. We would admit it doesn't help us to work together and solve problems. So if we admitted that, we wouldn't be competing, fighting, and arguing. We would be helping, and we would be standing up for helping as the right way of living. People would also be healthy because we would have health care for everyone. People would have enough clean food and water to live on. And people would be working to clean up the air, the water, and the land. Partly because it feels so good to take care of things and to take care of the planet. People would have a place to live that they could count on. People would have satisfying work to do, and people would have enough to live on. I've been thinking that we have to change ourselves so that we have a democratic attitude towards other people. To do that, we're talking about taking a new look at everything we know, our culture, our meritocracy, and our belief in competition. As Dan DeWalt also said, our belief in the profit motive. So it's what our parents thought about the world that we have to look at, and the people in it, what we learned in school, the books we read, the movies we watched, our hopes and fears, and our heroes and our dreams. And also the culture of dissatisfaction and resentment that we live in. Well, that's a lot to look at and to think about and to relearn. Are we up for it? I don't know if we're up for it, but I think we have to be. We have to change the world. And I don't think we can do it unless we change ourselves. In my thinking, democratic attitude means that I believe that all people are equal to me and I am equal to all other people. No bossing anyone around, no pulling rank on anyone else, unless they happen to be making life hard for all the rest of us. And if we did change, would it make a difference if we had a democratic attitude? And if we spent our time working on helping each other instead of strutting our stuff, would it make a difference? Well, that's the only thing I can come up with. So thanks for listening. But maybe Dan is right. If we had rules in place to keep out greed and influence and the influence of wealth, then we would be okay. Our democracy would work. The problem is that looking at our politics, I don't see how we can do that. So that's the end of my presentation. And I thank you for listening.
The biggest challenge is how do you practically re-educate a person to believe that at least in some way they are responsible for their neighbors or the other people in society.
Yeah.
And can you do that by just saying it? Or do you need to demonstrate by when you have people around you that help you make your living good? So one of the things is that you would have to get people to agree that there are basic things for the human being: clean water, food, shelter.
Yeah.
That these are things that are an essential part of your idea of community. Because basically the human being is alone. And so in order to survive, the human animal needs to take care of each other and cooperate until you are able to do for yourself. And at that point, you have to start doing for not only yourself, but your immediate surroundings, your family, your neighborhood, your community, your whatever. The ideal that many people have of America being on the top.
Yeah.
In many ways does have to do with certain things. Like a friend of mine from South Africa said, we never had a Bill of Rights in the founding of our country.
Mhm.
And we should really honor the Bill of Rights and develop our justice system based on that. And so it's something that exists. I mean, that we keep talking about the founding fathers and something, but they are ideals that really need to be made concrete in our society.
Mhm. For sure. Yeah. Well, I think a big part of our problem is that our media is pretty much oriented towards promoting profit making, profit taking, and consumerism. And we're just totally wrapped up in it, from television to movies to radio shows.
Hey, but this is the yin yang of everything that we're doing right now, is that without some kind of sharing of media, one is not going to be informed about the problems as well as the good things.
Oh, yeah, I certainly agree
Yeah.
that media has a big
And
role to
so,
play.
I mean, the media in many ways has changed, even in the near future, from what Benjamin Franklin and those people in
Mhm.
our early
Mhm.
society believed, because of the problem of we've been willing to pay for the technology that makes the media possible.
Mhm.
What you have to learn in many, even as recently as in the 1960s, when I was living in Europe, you identified your information by what paper it was coming from, because you knew that this
Mhm.
paper was always socialist and that paper was always conservative. And, and nowadays that's what we do with our television, is that we watch what tells us what we want to hear.
Yeah.
And so we need to start really doing and not just stopping other people from doing things that are wrong. We need to actually do the things that are for the benefit of saving the planet,
Mhm.
water, water, food, the stuff, and look, the whole idea of competition is what's going to be difficult to get rid of.
Mhm.
I mean, look at what's happened with in our education system, with what we are doing in our schools to direct kids to want to have a higher education. The whole system is so stressful for so many kids, and this has made it even worse during the pandemic, because they aren't really able to create the atmosphere, because of the health situation, that encourages kids to develop a respect for each other.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so, at the moment, I am really impressed by the number of people who voluntarily are working on bringing broadband to the rural areas.
Mhm.
There's a lot wrong with computers and the internet, but people making the effort to make it available so that the average person can choose whether or not they want to be gaining their knowledge and information, mostly, not knowledge necessarily. from the media. Television is a media. Internet is a media. But it also is only possible because we have a power system. I mean, you could blame this all on Edison if you want. That the ability for instant communication is a great thing, but it also can be abused. And one has to learn to recognize abuse and help people to understand that there is a different approach to some issue or problem, and then sort of make the different approaches come together and create what is basically best for the guy next to you.
Yeah. Do you feel that there's any hope that we can somehow
Yeah, I think it's very difficult during and particularly because something as basic as healthcare has been dumped all over. And somehow the idea that doctors are perfect, where now when you start talking about the fact that scientific research, which develops the medicines, which really improves one's health and makes it possible to live longer, if you're debunking that without even understanding, the whole vaccine thing, people, I can understand people not wanting to be vaccinated, but they also, off the top of their head, do not understand what careful preparation goes into developing these miracles. I mean, the fact that the human mind can spend tedious time to try to create something. Yes, there's also the bad side. There's so much money involved, and there's, how do you share it with other people? What is marketing? What is something, every action that you take in the society, as opposed to just your personal act of walking down the street, is complicated by the development of that idea and that product or situation.
Yeah. What I was starting to ask you before was, Dan DeWalt said that he thinks that our government could work if we had rules in place to keep out greed and the influence of the wealthy on our government. And I'm thinking at this time, and that's part of the reason that I came up with this idea of people rule, that at this time, there is no way that we can keep money and the influence of the wealthy out of our government.
Then what do you mean by people rule?
Well, it's just an idea. It's an idea, so it's a concept.
Yeah, but you're also asking about action.
No, I'm not. It's just an idea where you say, well, it's not people vote, it's people rule that's important. So I'm just saying that it's people rule that's important. I'm not saying how they rule, but in my opinion, people do rule in theory as a concept.
Right, but you're asking more than that because you think just the fact that they have the power makes them happy.
No. I only think that when it's acknowledged that people rule and they actually have a democracy, that they will be happy.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It won't make people happy just to think about that people rule.
Right.
But it might expand our thinking about democracy.
I think it's very hard to teach responsibility
Mm,
and positive responsibility for what you think is the right thing. You know, just not a simple, I live in Marlboro because I love the way people treat each other.
mm,
Um, I see from coming from living in large cities of value, whether whether my children agree or not, I think growing up in the atmosphere where they saw people voting for or against something on their school board, I grew up in a small, nice community in New Jersey, but I hadn't a clue who controlled the money.
mm-hmm.
I wasn't aware as a high school student.
Yeah, yeah.
We're here in this small town and in Vermont, we still have a certain degree of representative government, and that's kind of people rule. We talk about what we're going to do with our tax money.
Mm-hmm.
89% of us pay our taxes because we see it doing something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how many people don't want to pay, not here, but don't want to pay taxes and do whatever they can not to financially support the government that's supposed to be doing things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why can't we get money for infrastructure? The fact that 100 years ago, these guys in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution were able to build bridges, subway system in New York, 90% is 100 years old.
Mm.
It's amazing, and the technology of today is different, but it is a structure that is really affecting our life and allowing us to do different things or more things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's how do you help someone to have positive values? That's a big question. So that they spend their time and their money and their energies on things that benefit the whole community and not just themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we even jump on people who spend a lot of their fortune on positive things. I mean, look at the reputation of Bill Gates at this moment. He's someone who has spent most of his life. Yes, he's been greedy and makes a lot of money and stuff, but he's one of those that has put a lot of his wealth and shared it, in places that he saw medical needs, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And why would you sort of dump on that without countering with, this is what I think you should, and help put the money somewhere else?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that philanthropy is that kind of philanthropy is a very positive thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But the obviously the big question is, how do you actually help people to think about their whole community? It's been part of our human development, is that it used to be that extended family was teaching
Mm-hmm.
responsibility because there wasn't an outside system. This is what, grandparents said about the Social Security system. Oh no, it's a bad thing because, at some point it's a bad thing. because it's, you know, it's structured through the government and this game. That's not the way that now those people who complained about installing it back in the 1920s and 30s, they and their children and their children's children all depend on it.
Mhm.
As I mean, it's a socialist action that really even wealthy people depend on, or certainly middle class people depend on that for their health, because we don't have here a general health system.
Mhm.
Other countries have looked at that and said, you know, universal health care is important. And that's part of caring for your neighbor
Mhm.
and yourself and your family, because you damn well can't take care of yourself if you're hit by a car and
Mhm. Mhm.
you
Yeah,
can't get up off the road.
yeah. Yes, it's part of democracy, true democracy. Yeah.
So there needs to be, figure out a way to make people more responsible for others, and that's just really hard to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
What is the influence of, I mean, the society? Look at the problems that the English, because for so long they were a dominating factor in the world, because they had the technology of shipping and exploring,
Mhm.
and went to all these societies that had less. And, you know, it was at an era when it was really very hard not to say, I'm going to bring this into my surrounding.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, it's an individual struggle for each person. And it's very hard when we see our education systems. I mean, you know, there are many different education systems that have developed in the societies over the world. And it's very easy to be critical of the other guy.
Mhm.
But it also, and it's very difficult to say, well, this thing is a good thing, but that thing is really not fair. And that thing isn't worth the time. And that, you know, it's just really difficult. Maybe we should go back to basic education, which means you teach them to read, to write, and to hopefully think a little.
Mhm.
But then, you know, but that's going to be really hard, because we're losing the permanence of passing on your values to the next generation when you're inundated with all this information that's
Mhm.
not related to, in many ways, to anything but being impressed and, you know, seeking something. I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah.
And of course, I'm an old lady, so it's looking at what you've done with your life and what are you proud of and what are
Mm.
you really upset with yourself, because in the end it is just yourself and how you behaved and what you did.
Yeah. 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 For sure. Yeah.
But I think that because I was allowed, by living in this small rural community, to live with the basics to try to contribute to the education by being involved in the school board and helping them to do the day-to-day things that need to be done.
Mhm.
Involved in the zoning board and helping to explain our regulations to the person that wants to move into the community,
Mhm.
you know. And I don't know, the governor keeps talking about the fact that the southern part of the state was not really contributing, and they tried this, giving $10,000 to someone who wanted to move in to the state of Vermont if they were working for a company where they could work remotely.
Mm.
Didn't work in southern Vermont because we didn't have the ability for someone to work remotely.
Mm.
You
Yeah,
know, that was
well, that's
something they
true.
tried, what, 5 years ago, 8 years ago? And
Works
it
in Burlington.
the whole thing sounded so bizarre,
Mhm.
as if you don't have the ability to do what that reward is offering you,
Yeah.
it just silly. So I think we have to wake up to the fact that we'll have to work with this new technology. It's not going to help my generation because we can't figure out which button to push.
Yeah. Yeah.
The kids who grew up with it, my sons are of the generation where they grew up with it. So that meant that they would play with it and try things. And
Mhm.
when the new thing came out, they could figure it out right away. But when you're trying to go from a typewriter or a pencil, all these buttons,
Yeah. Very different.
very different. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking that in order to deal with the global warming, humankind needs to shift to an agrarian economy.
Go back in a way,
Oh, yeah.
because what we got out of, you figure even the small town of Marlboro,
Mhm.
when it was founded, everybody was raising their own stuff,
Yep.
or at least bartering their own
Mhm.
stuff.
Mhm.
And so how, I don't know, you tell me, how does that relate to people rule?
How does it relate? Yeah, well, as I said, it's a concept that I
Right.
think could be helpful in people reaching democracy.
What is a concept without action? How do you turn it into action? And I don't mean
That's a good
you, I mean,
question. Yeah, that's a good question. How does anything turn into action? I don't know. Somewhere there's an idea behind it. Well, I've enjoyed talking to you about it.
that's, thanks, Woody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You should shut me up.
No, it's great. Thanks for talking. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you to Gene Boardman of the Whetstone Inn in Marlboro, Vermont, for being part of this conversation. Thank you to WBEW and BCTV for airing our programs. And thank you to Andy Reichsman of Ames Hill Video for helping us with Zoom and with editing our video. Thanks so much, and good night to you.